because this isn't Candyland. I'm like nobody you've ever faced before. You can make fun of the color of my t-shirt, and you can talk about pie, and you can sing songs, and you can rhyme, and you can do your tired, lame-ass shtick. I just want you to know that come Royal Rumble, and you have about 3 weeks to realize this, I'm gonna kick your ass, because I'm the best in the world. I'm the best thing going today. I'm the best guy you've ever stepped foot in the ring with. And you need to understand, congratulations, Rock. You just graduated from the kiddie table, but you just bit off more than you can chew. You're playing Little League with your little insults and your rhymes and your millions and millions and your finallys. And I'm in the big leagues, and I'm swinging for the fence. You need to understand that your little jabs and your insults, it's all kiddie games. You can't leave a mark on the champ's face. Come Royal Rumble, understand, when you step in the ring, your arms are just too short to box with God.
Go ahead, pop off, me and my clique put on. I'm like a young McMahon, I'm here to get your bitch off. Like I'm Ric Flair, little finger to the big balls. Man, AKA police, guess I'm over your head like guitar.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to episode 6 of the Middle Aged Outlaws podcast. My name's Ross, and I'm here with Adam. Adam, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. Yourself?
I'm good, thanks. I'm ready to check my watch, rub the floor for some reason, and shout it's Clobbering Time, because we're doing our top 5 CM Punk matches today. I'm looking forward to it. How have you enjoyed watching some of these Punk matches on the network?
Yeah, it's been good. I think, when we talked about doing this, I had, a couple that sprang to mind immediately, and then I thought I'll look out for matches against certain individuals and give those a watch, and just try and sort of form my opinion of the best ones. But he's one of those performers who you don't get regularly, really, in my mind, breaking into the main scene, very much from an indie background. I know they've improved that side of things in the last few years, but he doesn't really have that slight, this is going to sound harsh, but that cookie cutter feel about him.
Yep.
And I think he's very much his own individual, did things his own way, had his own style, and just interesting character. Kind of good at everything, good in-ring worker, very good mic skills, and as he obviously mentioned in his pipe bomb. And yeah, just, I mean, one of the things you touched on is the kind of, would you be enthusiastic about seeing him back? And certainly from my point of view, I think he would fit in really well to the roster they've got just now. I think they're missing that little bit of, missing that little bit of edge, which might have been a funny phrase to use just now, but they've a lot of good performers, a lot of really talented workers in ring, and I think he would really add to that in the current environment.
Yeah. Well, I'll hold my peace just now. We can maybe come back to that after we've went through our matches, but it strikes me that Punk was, I think he would have fit in with what is happening in NXT and what's been happening in NXT maybe the last 5 years ago, where they just seemed to go on a bit of a binge of picking up all the kind of hot indie guys that were going about. And I said to you when we were going back forward on text that I feel like a lot of the time when I'm watching him, he's a guy that's out of time. I think possibly he would have fit in before the time that he came or after. I wonder if that's something that niggles at him, but I think a lot of things seem to niggle at Phil Brooks.
Fair point.
Right, before we get into all that, we did our top 5 finishers last week. We both finished with the Stunner as our number 1, and I'd asked anybody that was listening to get in touch and let us know if we'd missed anything. And we'd been talking about some of the more kind of horrendous looking finishers near the start of the episode, and Pat on Instagram, our man Pat, suggested that I take a look at Shane Helms' Vertebreaker, Don't know if you're aware of that, but Shane Helms obviously kind of famous for his Hurricane Helms character. It was quite funny for a period. But I think he might have been part of the cruiserweight division in WCW as well. Yeah. Are you aware of this, the Vertebraker?
It doesn't ring a bell. Like the main thing I remember when I think of of Shane Helms is the character, not so much the moveset. So it's maybe something I have to go out and try and have a look at.
Do you know, before I speak about his move, do you know that when he came, I think it was probably with the purchase of WCW, when he came to WWE, WWF, they got him to change his name to Gregory because Vince was concerned that people get confused with two Shanes in the company.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite something.
The Vertebraker is, he kind of has, he picks up the guy, he's got them on his back, he's got them hooked with his arms, but they're upside down, okay? So he's facing one way, their head is at the kind of bottom of his back with their legs up in the air, and he's got them hooked with his arms.
Okay.
And then he just drops, and the person has to kind of duck their head, or they will die.
Quite a high stakes move then.
Aye. And when you watch videos of guys taking it, a lot of them leave tucking the head to the very last minute. It's horrible to watch.
Yeah, I don't like the sound of that, but at the same time, I'm intrigued. So I'm gonna,
I watch a wee video of that.
Yeah.
It's no surprise that the Hurricane adopted the choke slam as his finishing move. So yeah, thanks for getting in touch, Pat. Always appreciate your comments. And before we jump into Punk, do we want to talk about the Rumble? That the Royal Rumble was this day. This is Tuesday, so the Royal Rumble wasn't Sunday night. What do you think of it?
I enjoyed it. I think it's always one of my favourite events. I think just the match itself sort of, separates itself from the rest of the schedule for the year. It's different, it's entertaining, and I thought it wasn't a bad match. I just started laughing in my head when you mentioned the chokeslam for Hurricane Helms. I'm trying to remember who it was. He tried to go for two at the same time, both big guys.
Kane and somebody maybe.
Yeah, and made a bit of a joke of the move, but he's that character. I think he's a trainer.
Is he? Aye.
Yeah, I'm sure he's with the company either as a trainer or a producer or something like that. So yeah, he's a good one to wheel out. He always gets a decent reaction. I enjoyed seeing Carlito, who was from an era that I wasn't the biggest fan. He was a decent character. I liked his catchphrases.
Do you think I think he's maybe been drinking a lot of apple juice.
Yeah. I mean,
he looks buff.
He did, and I know that there'd been mention of him being at a reunion show recently, and he wasn't there.
That's right.
And I think there were some people wondering, was there an issue or something like that? There obviously wasn't, if he's appeared on this. And I did hear again rumours that he could end up with a role, but probably not full-time in-ring performer, but some kind of different role.
Yeah. I think I saw he was on Raw on Monday night as well.
Was he?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, no, I enjoyed the show. I think it told a decent story. I loved the comeback of Christian,
yes.
And I think for them to put Edge, bell to bell in the match, great for him. Very impressive, physically for a guy who's not the youngest performer to be able to do that. I like the possible idea, if they go this way, of Edge and Reigns, but I don't know if that's the direction they're going to go in.
I do too. It makes too much sense, so they probably won't. They have to keep us marks on our toes, go with a swerve. But there's some good surprises. Like you say, having Captain Charisma back on our screens is always a good thing. I like the moment with Edge and Christian and the big hug. That was good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I said to you in a message, I was just, I don't think they would ever do it because I'm not sure if he's back full time, or he probably would never be back full time. It would just be the odd match here and there. But if they would have turned him heel on Edge, just have him try and put him out, behind his back or something like that, as you see so often with these pair-ups, but maybe they didn't want to tarnish the moment, which I can understand and see. But there was something I really liked about the heel Christian as well, just this smarmy, horrible little character. He was so good at it.
I was watching WrestleMania 20 the other night, and they kept referring to him as the CLB, and I was like, I had no idea what they were talking about, so I had to look it up, and this referred to a time when Stone Cold had called him a creepy little bastard, which I thought was amazing.
Yeah, I think I think they had quite a good relationship with him, because I'm sure Stone Cold first told them, it was Edge and Christian, or Edge or Christian, when he was driving to a venue, he was on the phone with them and telling them he was just going to start saying what every time there was a gap in the what his sparring partner verbally was saying, and Christian was like laughing, saying that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, and became huge, and they still do it to this day.
God, simultaneously the best and worst thing that ever happened in wrestling.
Yep.
No, it was a good event. I didn't have much to say about Drew and Goldberg. It kind of was what it was.
Yeah.
It was never going to be a 25-minute technical match. And I've not seen Reigns and Owens, but from your point of view, was that a good match?
I thought it was pretty good in that they didn't really... Owens didn't come out of it looking weak, despite the fact he lost the match. So there's still somewhere they can go with that. And I know they were very much painting it as the final opportunity for Owens. But there is... The way the match goes, there's a little bit of leeway there, because it certainly wasn't clean in that Owens could absolutely have won it. So, yeah, I think obviously there's no desire to take the belt off Roman Reigns just now, and why would you? Because he's the most interesting he's ever been. He's
probably the single most interesting thing about watching their shows.
Yeah, and I think you keep him on top while he's hot. It just makes sense. But at the same time, I didn't think it was necessary to kill Owens in it, and they didn't. So interesting to see where they go next. As I say, I think we're in the same mind. Hopefully it's Edge, because the potential of that is really interesting.
Yep.
If it's not, then I guess we wait and see what WrestleMania brings, because I'm pretty sure we now know it won't be Rock this year. I think that's kind of a known with... They're not going to give that away when they're either going to be very limited or no fans in attendance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting to see what happens.
It is, yeah. So, let's talk about CM Punk. Like Mussolini and Kennedy, he's a cult of personality apparently. So a little bit about Punk before we get into our matches. Highly decorated, although there's probably an asterisk next to his ECW championship, because that was WWECW, and it was a bit of a train wreck really. But Punk's the kind of guy that kind of shines wherever you put him. But ECW champion, WWE champion, Intercontinental champion. He won the Money in the Bank twice, 2 years in a row, I think. And Owen Hart, eat your heart out, 7-time Slammy Award winner, Adam.
Ooh.
Tell you, bet you Triple H hasn't won the Slammy Award 7 times. Nah, he probably has actually. So yeah, like we're gonna talk about Punk's matches, we're talking about WWE matches, simply because we've got the network at hand and it's really easy to access the matches. For all that Punk's had good matches in WWE, it sounds like he was this gigantic indie talent as well, and I know that he's had really good matches with like Samoa Joe and AJ Styles and Chris Hero in various different independent organisations. Yeah, so having been in Ring of Honor, and he worked with TNA for I think a very short time as well. when he signed with WWE, he was sent straight to OVW for a bit of developmental, I believe, that he was sent there to be shown how to work like a WWF or WWE wrestler, which probably started off his relationship with them. I'm sure he was delighted to be sent there. But he eventually debuted in ECW, using the straight edge gimmick that he seems to have used his whole career, and which seems to be which is a genuine thing that he seems to live his life by. And like I said, he won the ECW title there, and I think he had some good matches back and forward with John Morrison, Johnny Nitro, at that point. And after eventually moving, I think he moved to Raw around about 2008, won his first world title. He cashed in on Edge, who'd been beaten up by Batista on an episode of Raw. And then we go forward a year later, he cashes in again on Jeff Hardy after winning the Money in the Bank second time. After this, he jumps to arguably his best work in WWE before the pipe bomb, certainly. The Straight Edge Society. I know you liked the Straight Edge Society.
Yeah, it felt. You know how you always say something that's quite close to the individual in terms of the way they are, and I'm not saying he's a cult leader or anything like that, but you know, just the sort of, I don't know, quite forceful personality that he seems to have, and I just felt like that was quite a natural gimmick for him. It seemed to come quite easily. It didn't feel forced, and I thought it killed off too quickly. I thought they really could have gone somewhere with that.
It's a consistent thing, working your way through Punk's career in WWE, that things aren't seen out properly, or they fumble what could have been something even better. For that to have been finished the way it did with the Big Show, and it just, not great, but amazing work. And you know, I was saying to you that I really liked Seth Rollins' kind of cult leader thing that he'd been doing for probably like the last year or something. I'm not saying Seth Rollins ripped off Punk, but the writers clearly ripped off that storyline. It's almost a poorly done version of it.
Yeah, agreed.
And I don't know, I don't have this in my list. I don't know if you do either. He had a really good match with Rey Mysterio, a mask versus hair match, which I really enjoyed watching. It's just, I don't know, just a kind of simplicity and straightforwardness of what it was, and the match itself was great.
Yeah, I don't have it, but I was tempted by it. It is a good one, and it is one I rewatched when I was considering what to put on this. So yeah, definitely worth a look, that one.
So we go forward to about 2011, and Punk's back in a kind of title picture. I think this is round about when he dropped the pipe bomb weeks before Money in the Bank 2011, where he had that Meltzer rated 5-star classic with Cena. But I'm sure we'll go on to speak about this. But again, that was fumbled.
Yeah.
Triple H getting involved, and then John Laurinaitis was the kind of character that was involved, and it was just, we'll get into it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
He had the 434-day title reign, which was ultimately ended in slightly controversial fashion. I'm sure at the time that people probably weren't happy with the way that it finished. Again, I think we'll probably get into that later on. Unfortunately, after 2013, his in-ring work kind of petered out, and he ended up walking just after the Rumble in 2014. And that was the last time he officially stepped foot in a WWE ring. A sad end to a really good wrestling career.
Absolutely, and quite I think for purely a WWE fan, quite a short but very, successful career. There was a lot crammed into those few years, And obviously, you know, people who followed him through the Indies and things like that, there is a bigger body of work there. But he's still obviously very fondly remembered by WWE fans, especially, you know, I think the chants are still there anytime they do a show in Chicago. And I don't know what the company make of that. They probably prefer they weren't there. But yeah, I think there was a lot in quite a short period of time. And when I was looking through the matches I did pick, you know, there's probably a couple of years between every single one of them, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, it feels like he was that fish out of water, especially when, you know, I was saying this to you on text, when he was on ECW, he was also on Raw, he was also on SmackDown for matches.
Yeah.
He didn't look like anybody else looked. I think as time progressed into his kind of short hair, best in the world phase, he looked more like a star.
Yeah.
After the Straight Edge Society, and he'd had his hair shaved. But I think certainly when he cashed in the very first time on Edge, he just didn't, I don't know, he's not a prototypical black trunks, big muscly star that you expect from WWE.
Yeah.
It's quite refreshing. But also, yeah, I just wonder a lot of the time. Obviously, Punk's thing seems to have been that he didn't have the confidence of the people that were running the shows. But somebody must have been, and I know Heyman was supposedly speaking up from possibly too much. But yeah, he's been given a lot of leeway and the opportunity to do a lot of things. And some of these matches that he's put on, I think one of the matches that I've got on my list went 30 minutes, near enough.
Right.
Somebody somewhere must have been saying that they supported him, but yeah, we'll never really know. Anyway, shall we jump in?
Yep.
Let's do it. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first.
Hit me. Number 5.
So number 5 is Punk against Chris Jericho. This is from Payback 2013.
Yes.
So this, aside from the fact it's got two of my favourite performers in it, you know, we've talked Jericho previously, maybe controversially, in terms of inclusion on best ever lists.
Hold on. So I think we might have to revise that. After watching Jericho's lion salt 2 weeks ago in Dynamite, where he damn near broke his neck, we might have somewhere down the line we might have to revise our goats. Anyway, sorry.
That's fair. I haven't seen that.
Don't want to.
So yeah. This match was billed as like a comeback for CM Punk. So obviously I couldn't cast my mind back to everything that was going on storyline wise here, but I think they mentioned that he'd been inactive basically since WrestleMania at the time, and I believe that was the WrestleMania where he lost to Undertaker. So he was coming in cold, and they're playing off that. They're kind of, it feels like they're almost giving excuses for what is expected to be a defeat or a struggle as a match, and the match itself kind of tells the story of a heelish Jericho, and obviously he's full heel because it's in Chicago, and that means that Punk is, you know, full on babyface, and it wouldn't really matter what the storylines were or the story arcs were at the time. I know Punk was heel in the Undertaker match, but again, that's at WrestleMania, so it's hard to just remember where everything was and the pieces fell at the time. But they start the match off with, you know, quite and I noticed this in quite a few Punk matches, it's quite methodical, it's quite slow paced.
Yes.
And you look and you think this guy, you know, I was certainly thinking of a faster paced, you know, work, but it all builds, and I think it happens in every match.
Definitely. This is something that I wanted to bring up with you as well. Consistently, I didn't know if it was because I was watching the same guys' matches all the time, but it never got old. Sometimes you can watch the same matches and you look for spots, and some guys do the same spots every match. I didn't feel like that with Punk, and I also noticed the slow build as well. and it felt like you were. That's why I was saying to you about wrestling out of time, because it felt like you were watching an older match.
Yeah.
I really appreciated it.
And I think what they're doing a lot of the time when you've got these, this sort of level of worker, I think they're feeling out the crowd as well. And I don't think that they want to start off too hot necessarily if they're going to be building to a climax. And I've heard mentioned of a few other stars and, huge names in the business who would go out, and I think it was mentioned of Ric Flair. If the match before him was a barnstormer, if it tore the place down, he would deliberately start his match off slow because he needed to bring the crowd back down before, any sort of big spot or anything like that. Whereas if the match before had been poor, if the crowd hadn't got into it, he would start off quick because he felt the need to get them going. And I'm not saying that this is, something that they were looking at, because to be honest, the crowd were hot because it was in Chicago anyway. It probably wouldn't have mattered, but it's the kind of thing, until I heard it being talked about, and I imagine only some of them have this about them, is to be able to feel the crowd and then determine what sort of pace you're going to go at.
Clever.
Which is, really intelligent of workers at that level. But yeah, it's quite methodical to start off with, and then from really early on, Punk's sort of selling, being a bit fatigued and a bit winded, just from the grappling that's been going on, and the first sort of thing of note that I'd made note of was Punk going for a bulldog, and Jericho countering and then hitting a lion salt. You've just mentioned he maybe shouldn't be doing lion salts anymore. That should maybe be a thing of the past for him. I noticed, I will mention this in more than one of the matches I've got listed, but what he seems to be very good at, CM Punk, is countering. So there's a kind of a logic there, and I get frustrated with some performers in some matches where it looks, and obviously he is, but it just looks like somebody is just allowing the opponent to do a move on them. Whereas when I'm watching CM Punk, it looks like he's constantly trying to counter what his opponent's doing.
That's interesting.
When you think about two performers, if it was, a real contest, that is absolutely what you would be doing. So yeah, there's quite a few counters in this from early on. There's a GTS, go to sleep, that is attempted by Punk and is turned into a Walls of Jericho. And then Punk's able to counter the Walls of Jericho and apply is it called the Anaconda Vice?
Sticking his legs round him.
Yeah. No. So he's... I try to think how I can explain what it looks like. I'm sure it's called Anaconda Vice.
Cool, I believe you.
So yeah, there's a bit of back and forth, a bit of, move and counter move and things like that. And, the commentators keep backing it up that it's Punk's not only looking a bit winded, but there's certain points in the match where it's like he's looking for help. So they're obviously trying to bring the crowd into it, and they're very happy to get into it, and try and give him the support he needs. And it made me think, having not followed the story all the while, but I may touch on this later, but some of the stuff Punk was doing in the build-up to the Undertaker match was pretty close to the bone, and he maybe, if he hadn't had the right type of environment and right type of match after that, he may have been full heel, when I don't think that was the intention at the time. I think they were trying to pivot off to a babyface, so have him in Chicago, have him, needing the crowd's help to win the match, have him looking a little bit defeated, and it started to really liven up as the counters were flowing, and I'll just sort of walk through a few more segments in the match. So Punk tries a GTS a couple more times and it's countered twice, and again, it's got this feel of, can he actually execute this? Has he got it in him to lift him up? Has he, got that strength and that control? One of the times that he goes for it, Jericho counters it into a roll-up for a near fall. He's very much looking second best throughout this sort of phase of the match. One of the moves that I kind of forgot that he did, because it's a while since, certainly I've probably never gone through just watching CM Punk matches, which was quite a change from normal viewing. He really likes the top rope elbow, Macho Man style.
Love that.
And he executes it really well. And there's a segment in the match where he hits that, and then he hits a GTS, and Jericho kicks out. And, at this point they do, I think they've done it over the years with Hogan and Cena and, these super over babyface characters, where he then looks lost, and the view is, how am I actually going to beat this guy? I don't know what to do next. And the crowd actually start chanting one more time. So they're basically chanting, saying, another GTS, hit another GTS. So he lifts up Jericho for it, and the crowd's really bubbling, really into it at this point. Jericho starts elbowing his way out, and he goes for a code breaker, which is blocked. So by this point, all methodical pace is kind of out the window. It's now quite fast, but fatigued looking with it. And then Punk, another spot I've noticed he does quite a lot is the dive through the ropes.
Yep.
Onto the opponent.
Suicide dive.
Yeah, and it's a nice looking move. It looks like it hurts for his landing, but anyway, we've then got a code breaker that Jericho hits. The timing of it is really impressive.
This is one of the best spots I've ever seen in a match.
Yeah, it's. We've seen all the. Randy Orton can perform an RKO out of nowhere, and it can be so smooth looking because he catches somebody in midair. This is what this code breaker was. It was beautifully done. The timing was absolutely perfect.
I was thinking about how do they time that Jericho hits the floor at the same time as he hits him with his knees. It's amazing.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think they would have ever given Jericho the win in Chicago, but if he was going to get the win, that would have been the move to do it on. The whole while Paul Heyman's with, he's in the corner, he's on the outside, he's very good at looking panicked for his guy, and he's selling that big time. And then there's another Walls of Jericho applied. The crowd kind of seem to bring Punk back in when it looks like he's in a lot of trouble. The match, the end of the match, is something I don't think I've seen in another match. I could be wrong, but there's actually 2 GTSs hit in the sequence for the end of the match. So he hits one, and Jericho is looking like he's out, but he's not hit the ground. He hasn't actually fallen to the ground. And then Punk hits another one straight away, and that's it, and that's the 3 count. So yeah, I thought it was a really good story of, I'm making my comeback, I'm not sharp, I'm struggling a bit, I'm against a top performer, because they both came out of it looking pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm in my hometown, I need the crowd to bring me back in. And then I think because the stature he's at, one comeback win, and he's he can be in main event picture again straight away. So yeah, that was my number 5 match. Thought it was a really impressive match. 2 skilled workers, great hot crowd, nice move sequences, and told a good story.
Brilliant. I had that as an honourable mention. I definitely toyed with it. I thought it was a great match. I'm with you all the way on that one. It's really good and worth a watch. Okay. For my number 5, I'm going to go with his first match against The Rock at the Royal Rumble 2013. This was the match that ended his 434-day reign as WWE Spinner Belt Champion, whatever that belt was called. I watched both the matches of his with The Rock. I know that a lot of people, I think it's Elimination Chamber 2013, they fought it as well.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people like the second one better. But for me, this match at the Royal Rumble was my favourite of the two, and just kind of pipped that Jericho match that you've just talked about there. First of all, I thought it was a really good, these packages that WWE do, which, they're amazing at putting together these packages before the match, and this was a really good package. It felt to me like, I don't know how long The Rock had been back at this point. I assume this was him just coming back for these matches in the build towards WrestleMania with Cena. I don't know if this was the first or the second. They went back to back, didn't they, WrestleManias?
Yeah, I think it would be... it's maybe the second one.
Right. It felt like Punk was just wrecking him on the mic, promo-wise. He had this really good promo where he's talking about being the best in the world. And even talking about being the best in the world can come across as really cringy, just generally, especially if Shane McMahon's saying it. But yeah, Punk sold it, and he says you need to realise that your arms are just too short to box with God. He says that. It's just a quality line. But yeah, I think I've mentioned it a couple of times already, but yeah, this felt like jumping in a time machine and watching a classic Rock Attitude Era match. I felt like they worked together really well. It was methodical, it was slow and built up to crescendo, exactly like what you were talking about there. At this point in time, I think that Punk must have introduced the Shield. Is that right?
I know.
Do you remember?
He was involved in that. I'm trying to think the timeline. That probably is about right, actually.
So there was a stipulation with this match that if the Shield got involved, then Punk would be stripped of the title. So I guess the storyline was that they were interfering in his matches, and were they there to help him beat up Ryback or something like that, maybe? Yeah,
I think that's what it was brought in for originally, and then they, I think, distanced themselves as more hired guns rather than specifically for
with
Punk.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Because he must have been with 2011 was a Nexus, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it was just a really good back and forward match. One of the better matches that I think The Rock has had since he's been in and out, and back and forward with movies and wrestling. It's got a really hokey finish, and then this was what maybe really made me kind of swither between putting this in. But I just enjoyed the match overall. If it finished the way it finished, it would have been probably higher up for me. But the finish, the lights go out, they're outside the ring, the lights go out, you hear The Rock or someone getting beaten up, lights come back on, and The Rock's been put through a table, and Punk's standing in the middle of the ring selling it like, oh, what happened? And there can be many people like Michael Cole, but he's going, it was the Shield did it. He's going over and over. You can imagine Vince in his ears, tell him it was the Shield. And JBL's going, shut up, you stooge, shut up. Is it brilliant? So Rock kind of climbs back in the ring, or Punk gets him back in the ring, counts, I think it may be GTS some 1, 2, 3, and he retains the title and he's celebrating. And then the genetic jackhammer comes strutting out and says, he's about to strip him of the title. He says, I told you if the Shield got involved in your match, you get stripped of the title. He's like, oh yes, I know, we didn't see them, but... so he's about to do it, and then The Rock grabs the mic, sat there on the floor, half dead, and is like, no, you're not stripping him of the title, I'll finish the job, restart the match. They restart the match, and like Punk is over to him, he hits him with his knees in the corner, he's all over him, then out of nowhere, The Rock hits the spine buster and the people's elbow, and the 434-day reign is beaten by an elbow drop.
Yeah.
Which is really, really unsatisfactory. But let's do a bit of revisionist history. Remove that Okay. So Punk got the I was going to say the clean win. He got the win after the Shield beat him up. It's a great match. It's really worth going back and watching, especially if you enjoyed Attitude Era, the Attitude Era, and The Rock's kind of work there. Because, yeah, like I say, I felt like they gelled really well, and I know a lot of people, Punk included, wanted it to be a triple threat match at WrestleMania with him,
Right.
Cena, and The Rock. And him and Cena had great chemistry as well. You know, like it wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world for that to have happened, but that's not the way it went.
Yeah, I think in hindsight that it might have been a good idea from a couple of points of view, because I think one of the biggest things that Punk was always unhappy about is he never got the main event, did he? He was never the Mania main event, but also I don't know what it came across like in this match, but you know, I've always loved the Rock's work and all elements of it, to be honest, but I do remember thinking when he came back that he would blow up quite. He would start struggling physically in matches, and you know, if it was triple threat, they could have had him out of elements of it and things like that.
Yep.
So yeah, in hindsight, it might have been a good idea.
It's a shame, and ultimately he goes on to fight. He goes on to wrestle the Undertaker at that WrestleMania. So, you know, it's not the worst result in the world.
No.
As I'm sure we will both come to talk about later on. So yeah, that's my number 5, Rock Punk at Royal Rumble 2013.
Cool. I remembered the match, but one of the things I would have liked to have done is to go back and watch a bit of the verbal jarring, because the two very good talkers there. There was a podcast I was listening to the other day. I don't know if you ever heard any of Conrad's ones with Tony Schiavone. Because he was in the WCW bubble, he never heard The Rock do a promo, and they've gone back and watched some old WWE events, and it was WCW was done by this point, but he just switched off from wrestling, so they were building up to the Mania 18 Rock Hogan match, and The Rock delivers this promo, and Tony Schiavone's like, it's a watch along, so he's reacting to what he's seeing and hearing, and he's like, my God, what is this?
Brilliant.
It's the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life.
That's quality. No, I've never heard that. That's amazing that he was in that sphere and then had never really heard them before. That's cool.
Yeah, I think he knew they'd had a match. I think he talks about a little bit of bitterness, and he, losing company, wasn't offered a job, and he just didn't really want anything to do with wrestling. But he's enjoying now going back and watching some of the stuff he missed.
Ah, brilliant! I'll have to get that a listen. What we got, number 4?
So number 4, this one I swithered about, and I ended up watching it and thinking, yeah, I'm going with it. So, Punk v Lesnar, SummerSlam 2013.
Yep. Me too.
So, you've got this.
Yeah,
okay.
number 4.
Oh, excellent. I've not been the biggest fan of Lesnar's in-ring work for a while, and I thought, but it's 2013, it's a while ago, so I'll give this a go and see what it's like. And I was very pleasantly surprised, because matches, this starts at a hell of a pace. It's a fast pace, it's dominant Lesnar, it's looking like he's going to squash him, and let's face it, he's squashed so many people that it could have happened that way. And then I was actually amazed by how much offense they gave Punk.
Yep.
To the extent, and we'll get there, but he actually looked like, all things being fair, he should have won the match.
Yep.
And kind of got screwed out of it, which I couldn't really remember how it had happened. I knew they'd had a match, and yeah, I was just, I thoroughly enjoyed rewatching it, and it just made me that little bit sad about how Lesnar could be used as opposed to what they tend to do with him.
It's really frustrating. Something that I've noticed about Lesnar across the years, especially, if he seems to like someone, if he seems to like a talent, he'll sell for them. I think I've spoken about this before. He's a really underrated seller.
Yeah.
I think I'm back to a match he had with Finn Balor at one of the Royal Rumbles, and he was, again, similar to what you were saying there, he was letting him get in so much. He did the same with Seth Rollins. I think the credit for this match goes to both of them, but I think to Lesnar for making this seem like a believably, like, what's the word I'm looking for?
An even contest?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Aye. Like, look at the two guys that are involved, but the way that Lesnar's selling, you totally believe that Punk's his equal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think we sort of talked about, fast start, dominant physical performance, but when Punk takes over, which, early on it happens in little fits and bursts, so he gets a little bit of offense in, and then the monster comes back, and there's a point where I think he drives Lesnar into the ring post on the outside to then take a little bit of advantage, and there's then a sequence later where he bites him, and it's I think they reference Tyson and stuff like that. It's desperation to try to do something to try and get back in, but there's a point throughout, maybe in between those two events, where Lesnar just throws Punk over the announce tables.
Yep. Well, like, brutally.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say actually about this match. Some of the bumps and some of the punches and the strikes that they're hitting each other with, they're pretty close to the bone.
Yeah.
But aye, that is brutal. He launches them.
Yeah. And what I really liked, because, when the commentators do a good job at this, it works so well, but they're positioning Punk as this underdog that won't quit. And, who doesn't have respect for that? You have to respect it. And I think they even have Heyman shouting, quit, tap out, give up, and things like that.
Yeah.
And the commentators are saying, the usual kind of, live to fight another day, that kind of thing. But regardless of what he's hit with, he won't quit. And that, it's a classic way of building somebody, Steve Austin at WrestleMania against Bret Hart, that person that just won't give up.
Yeah.
And also, again, he hits the elbow drop, which is obviously in his repertoire. I don't think I remembered just how many roundhouse kicks Punk used to go for in his arsenal until I started watching all these matches, because they're there in pretty much every match. There's close ones in terms of, there's a GTS that's reversed into an F5, which Punk squirms out of and then hits a roundhouse kick. And then there's a moment where Lesnar goes for Punk goes for a GTS again. Lesnar blocks it and applies a Kimura, and then Punk manages to counter that into a triangle choke.
Yep.
And given the credentials Lesnar had, I thought it was actually quite something to let Punk counter his move into his own submission hold. I thought that said a lot, certainly, about Lesnar's willingness to, as we touched on before, to let Punk have a lot of offense in the match.
What about the spot with the tie and Heyman him grabbing it? And Brock's going, let go! He's like, I can't let go! That was brilliant.
Yeah, it was really good. Like, again, this is one where when you watch a match in isolation, I couldn't really get the feel for it. Obviously, Heyman is that guy that's been aligned with both these, and they're probably the two that you think of most when you think of Paul Heyman. But I think they mentioned something in the build-up about how Punk didn't want Heyman as a manager anymore, and Heyman had taken that as, I don't want anything to do with you. Whereas for Punk, it came across as this is a business decision, and he was then, full Lesnar. He was wanted Punk eliminated, basically, because he.
Oh, sorry, we lost you there for 1 second, Adam. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, I was just talking about the relationship, and they're both Heyman guys, and Heyman had gone with Lesnar, and wanted Punk eliminated effectively. So it made sense for him to get involved in the match.
Yeah.
So then, Lesnar lifts Punk up, and I think he's going to be going for an F5, and Punk's just reaching out, and Heyman's on the apron, and he grabs Heyman's tie, and he's looking like he's choking him, and there's that bit of dialogue between them, which is just one of these slightly light-hearted moments in a pretty brutal match.
Yeah. It's great storytelling. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it annoys me when you've got these managers who get physically involved for no apparent reason, but for me it just made sense on this occasion. Yeah. There's a spot in the match as well which I wanted to reference, because again, I think, certainly I do think of Lesnar as this, robot type character who maybe doesn't have a lot of friends in the business. He does the 3 suplexes, the 3 amigos as they were called, and I don't know if it was, but it came across as a little bit of an Eddie Guerrero tribute, when he just goes for one after the other. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Nice. I don't remember that. Does he do the front facing suplexes rather than his usual? Ah, nice.
Yeah. And he does the 3 in a row, and just a sort of nice moment, The Lesnar ends up getting frustrated in the match and brings a chair into the ring, which they kind of grapple with. I think Punk seizes control of the chair, and there's a spot where he goes for his elbow drop from the top turnbuckle, and he's got the chair.
Aye.
And getting lost in the moment and all that, I did start to think, does Punk win this? Because they're so used to Lesnar going over in matches, and if somebody said, oh, these two had a match in 2013, I would have thought, well, obviously Lesnar wins that. But it did start to make me wonder as I'm watching it, because there were quite a few very near falls there. End of the match, they have Punk looks like he's got it won, and he hits the GTS. Heyman interrupts the count. Lesnar goes for an F5. Punk counters it into a DDT for another near fall, and then he applies the Anaconda Vice, and it's broken up by Heyman. Punk applies the Vice to Heyman. Lesnar breaks it up with chair shots.
I was just like, why are you doing that? That's really stupid. That's the one bit of this match I was like, no.
Yeah.
So silly.
And then there's the F5 to finish it, where Punk actually lands on the steel chair that had been used previous. So, yeah, good match, good in-ring action, but I didn't expect beforehand for them to put over Punk so strong in defeat, albeit in defeat, but he looked every bit the equal and actually looked like he was screwed.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You touched earlier about Punk never getting the main event at WrestleMania, and I felt that this felt to me like a WrestleMania main event. It felt isolated in that, although you had Heyman interfering, you didn't have the usual kind of nonsense of somebody coming running in and sticking him with a DDT or just the kind of silly interference that you sometimes get with these type of matches. It felt like a isolated main event between 2 really big superstars, and this seems to be a common theme with Punk and SummerSlam, where he has these really amazing matches. But yeah, I loved it as well. I was really surprised at how long it went for. I was kind of waiting for the finish after a while, and it just kept going. And Brock seemed to be getting pinker and pinker. But nah, I'm with you. That was great. So that was our number 4s.
Yep.
Number 3, what you got?
Number 3. This, when I was writing them all down and doing my research and having fun watching stuff, this was the one that I thought I'm gonna have the most difficulty articulating why I enjoyed it so much. So bear with me, I will try. It's Punk against Daniel Bryan. It's Over the Limit 2012.
Yep.
And these are again two of my favourite performers, but two of the just best in-ring performers that I've seen. The idea of actually watching a match between the two of them, I was really enthusiastic for that. I thought when I was seeking out to do my research for this, I thought I've got to have a look at some Punk v Bryan matches. I know that they'd had a history in the Indies, but they weren't matches I saw. So, going back and watching this, I thought it's bound to be a good in-ring show. Compared to some of the other ones, there aren't that many, big spots in it. A lot of it is technical mat wrestling. A lot of it is, attempts at submission holds and counters to submission holds and things like that. But I think it just as a match shows off the skill set that both performers have got.
Yep.
I think both performers were greeted fairly warmly by the crowd.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this. They were clearly trying to paint Daniel Bryan as the heel.
Yeah.
Given what seemed to happen with Kane, maybe like on the SmackDown before the event.
Yeah.
But he's so over. Like,
yeah.
The crowd can't help but chant yes.
Yeah.
When he gets these kicks going and all that.
Yeah, and you notice there's the signs in the crowd. There's the yes signs and all that. And I couldn't remember if this was just the yes movement becoming a thing, or if it had already been around a while. But yeah, what I noticed in it is you get some dueling crowd chants, which I know was always a big thing on the Indies, where there's chants of Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, and it's just quite good to listen to and quite good to hear that.
That triggered a thought with me as well, and I noticed that as well, and I remember thinking when I was watching it, is this one of the early times that this has happened? Because these days it's kind of like a let's go Cena sucks, or let's go Roman sucks and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I wondered if this was one of the kind of early times of that starting.
Possibly. I mean, the first I remember hearing it, really random, I think it was in TNA, and it was AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels.
Nice.
And I thought, this is babyface against babyface, obviously, which isn't a thing in WWF, not very often anyway.
Yeah.
And it, I think it just shows it can work. It's just a different type of crowd reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I really liked about this, we talked previously when I was talking about the Jericho match about the slow starting pace and then building, and this match does similar. And this is obviously intentional. They're both painted as slightly smaller guys and guys who are very good technically. There's a lot of spots in this where they go for the same move. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of faced with each other trying to do the same thing. And there's also a moment in it, a couple of moments in it, where both of them single out a body part. And it's so almost old-fashioned thinking, because you normally just see, right, high spot, whatever part of them I land on is where I land. But early on in the match, it becomes clear after performing a move that Daniel Bryan's struggling with one of his legs. Mm-hmm. And Punk just unleashes this flurry of kicks on the legs, and then so many moves after it are targeting the legs. And then there's a point later on where I think it becomes clear when Punk goes for his flying elbow drop that his ribs are a problem, mm-hmm. because he can't go for the cover straight away. He's rolling around a bit in his own pain, and then as soon as Bryan gets the advantage again, he goes after the ribs. And it's that sort of logic, if this is real, if I'm a competitor in the ring and that person is hurting in that area, that's the part I'm going after. Mm-hmm. That's the weakness, so I'm going to try and expose it. So a lot of, it's probably considered old-fashioned stuff, but it works because it's logical.
Yeah, it's storytelling.
Yeah,
It's the old Bret Hart, Ric Flair, even Triple H method. That's what you used to get with pretty much every match.
yeah. Yeah, I liked the finish as well, because with Daniel Bryan being a guy that they're building, and you know, obviously they were reluctant to build him quite as far as he ended up getting built, but they were building him as a guy who could compete, I think, with top tier performers. And in the sort of final sequence, there's a running knee attempted by Punk, which is countered into the yes lock by Daniel Bryan. And the finish actually comes about where Punk rolls Bryan's shoulders onto the mat when he's countering the yes lock. And while he's still got the lock applied, the referee counts Bryan's shoulders down. So he's effectively, you know, been on the offense, been in the ascendancy, but his shoulders are counted down. Which, you know, he comes out of the match not looking like the loser, if you like. So yeah, I imagine, and you know, I heard a story, I think it was when Punk was on the brink of leaving, that he wanted more matches with Daniel Bryan, and I think he wanted a WrestleMania match with Daniel Bryan, and Triple H's response was something like, well, you know, who's going to pay to see that? And I think that's probably a lot of the frustration, is that he's seen somebody he can work with and had good chemistry with, but then the view is, well, yeah, that's fine, but we need a star in the match, you know. It can't just be a worker, there needs to be a star. But yeah, just really enjoyable match, sort of old school style match, a lot of just logical storytelling, like you say, two guys just, I think, wanting to be better than the other, and storytelling can be as simple as that.
Yeah. Something that I have to take you to task with there is the finish. I feel a little bit differently than you with the finish. To me, you know, I talked about the Rock finish being a bit hokey. I just feel like WWE do this far too much. It's this thing of trying to protect people constantly. Like, they've just went 25 to 30 minutes, pretty much showing that they're each on each other's level.
Yeah.
Whoever wins is coming out looking strong, but whoever loses is still coming out looking strong. I feel like a clean finish. I don't know. I feel like a clean finish, it obviously strengthens the winner. But say Punk beats Daniel Bryan there, Daniel Bryan still looks like a main eventer as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think one of the things about it is, for me, if you were doing a series of matches between the two, so say this was match 1, it's giving you the reason to have match 2, in the fact that it was a little bit of a cheap finish.
I almost had you.
But then I don't think they ever went ahead with the next one. So yeah, by that token, it should have been a more definitive finish.
That's what this felt like to me. It felt like the first volume in a series.
Yeah.
This felt a bit like Bret Shawn and like Benoit, Angle and Jericho. It felt like that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, certainly when I was watching it, Daniel Bryan's in-ring work really reminded me of Benoit. I don't know if you got that. You get that from him?
Yeah, I think he even performs a flying headbutt at one point.
Yeah, I wondered if that's quite. I wonder if he's allowed to do that.
Yeah, I think they were both guys that were kind of inspired by Dynamite Kid, and some of the moves in common that they've got are probably natural from that. But yeah, I see that, and there's something. I think I was going to mention it again in across the next two matches we talk about. I don't want to sound like contradicting myself from previous, because I've talked about moves that used to be finishers but are now just moves that are in a set. CM Punk actually does a lot of them through his repertoire. He performs DDTs, he performs elbow drops off the top. And the one thing I would say about it, even though I haven't seen him finish a match doing it, they do always still feel like big spots rather than just clothesline or something like that. They do feel like big moves, but he does take a lot from others. He incorporates them really well, and it feels like he owns them when he does them. But I don't think I really recognised at the time just how many moves he uses. that have been used by others previously.
It feels to me like he feels to me like someone that the older wrestlers would really love.
Yeah.
It feels like he's bridging the gap between kind of paying homage a lot of the time, like you say, with DDT and the flying elbow, and there are other moves that he does as well that I feel like he's kind of shown himself as a kind of throwback.
Yeah.
Whilst also mixing in like the Muay Thai kicks and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that as well, especially DDT. It's like a prestigious move rather than like you say, a run-of-the-mill move that somebody will hop up from. So that was your 3. That was my 3 as well.
Excellent.
I have a feeling that we might be pairing the same on 2 and 1 as well. But we'll see. But that's if you like that kind of style, if you like that kind of angle, Benoit, dueling back and forward, technical kind of match, then this is worth a watch, I would say. There's a lot less, there's a lot less playing to the crowd and silliness, if you will. That it's just a really good technical match. So I don't know if you watched it, because I don't know if it was immediately before it, but did you see Josh Matthews interviewing Punk before the match?
No, I didn't.
That's worth going back and watching. He asks him, I don't know, he asks him about something that happened, and Punk does this brilliant impression of Vince about if you told him that CM Punk and Daniel Bryan would be fighting on his card or whatever, then. And he does this kind of Vince impression of who the hell is he. It's quite funny. Quite funny.
Yeah, I will go back and watch that.
Something that you shouldn't go back and watch. Like, how good is this? This would you say it's a 5-star match? Close to it.
I think there's 2 things that I wonder about, because I think for it to be 5-star, we talked about the finish. And I probably didn't. I didn't mind the finish for the match it was, but I think if you're in a 5-star match, you have to have a more definitive finish than that for me.
Fair enough.
And also, this isn't. It's not a criticism of either performer. It's the scenario they're in. I didn't feel like it was. It maybe doesn't matter in terms of the stars, but it didn't feel like the spotlight match, if you know what I mean.
Well, that's where I was going. That's why I was asking you, because the match that main evented this show was John Cena versus John Laurinaitis.
Wow.
This Punk Bryan match is for the title. Like, it's positioned, I think there's like 2 or 3 matches before the main event.
Yeah, I knew it was mid-card when I went to it on the network, and it did leave me wondering what's above it, but I never actually looked at it, and I'm glad I didn't. But yeah, I mean, what they could have had is, if they'd made that, the main event, the spotlight match, I think you get a little bit more build, you get a little bit more TV time with that and all that, and you can really build things up, but yeah, obviously they felt Johnny Ace had a bit more to contribute at the time.
He pops up everywhere in this podcast as old Johnny Ace. This again, similar to what I was saying about the Lesnar match, this felt like this would have been a really good WrestleMania main event.
Yeah.
Especially if this had been volume 1 of a series and it was built upon, and maybe they got, like one gets one gets the other, and you do the rubber match at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
But unfortunately it wasn't to be. But okay, number 3. Let's jump to number 2. Okay, number 2 has become apparent to both of us, I think, that we're on the same wavelength for the remainder of this episode. So
Yeah.
Let's go to number 2, WrestleMania 29. For CM Punk versus The Undertaker.
Yeah, we talked previously, or mentioned previously, emotionally charged situations and maybe Punk going a little bit too far in the build-up to this. I think from memory that Paul Bearer had legitimately, fairly recently passed away.
Yeah.
And they used that as part of the storyline for the build to this match, with Punk being pretty disrespectful about all things Paul Bearer. I have heard, I think it was Bruce Pritchard talking on a podcast saying, you know, anyone who knows anything about Paul Bearer will say that he would have wanted to be involved in, you know, his death to be used in storyline. He was that type of character, that type of personality.
I'm
but,
sorry
you know,
for laughing. It's just incredible.
We can't really question that now. So, yeah, I just thought a bit too close to the bone for my liking, you know. But they go through the whole thing of the disrespect and the stealing of the urn, which Paul Heyman's carrying about on the trip to ringside for this match. And all through the match, it's funny because we talked previous about respect and Punk, you know, probably having the respect of the older style wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually is setting out to use a lot of that at The Undertaker for a sign of disrespect in this match, which is interesting because he's trying to perform Undertaker's moves, basically.
Yeah.
And I like the matchup, I like the characters. I think at the time, I actually believed that Punk is somebody they maybe could have ended the streak with. And I still wonder if that could have happened, but, you know, if he would have left the business abruptly anyway, it might not have been the wisest thing to do. But, yeah, it basically starts with a slap to the face from Punk to Undertaker, and that's, you know, the next step in the signs of disrespect, and that prompts a very fast-paced start from Undertaker, going for strikes. He's a very angry man, and fairly early on in it, actually, you know, when you compare it to matches like the Lesnar one, Punk actually takes control, and I imagine a big part of this is potentially, you know, Punk having the athleticism and the stamina to be able to control a match like this. And he goes for the old school rope walk move, and so he's twisted Undertaker's arm, goes up to the top turnbuckle, walks along the ropes, and comes down on the arm.
I was at that point I was expecting that to get, because that is really seen as disrespectful. I expected that to get reversed, but when he went through it, I was like, oh wow.
Yeah, and he does go for it again.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go so well the second time. But yeah, it's, you know, obviously with the stature of Undertaker, he has to be fine with everything that's going on, otherwise he's not going to do it. So I would think, again, you talk about respect, and I think it's known that there were some people that Punk had issues with. I can't imagine. I think from Undertaker's point of view, all he would care about is somebody's, you know, professional in the ring, does their performance,
Carries knives in their bag.
Yeah,
doesn't he play computer games?
All that kind of stuff. So I imagine the fact that Undertaker allowed Punk to do these moves is a sign of respect.
Yeah.
And when Punk's got control, he again goes for his flying elbow drop off the top rope, which Taker kicks out of. Again, the action, you know, ends up outside the ring, and Undertaker goes for, it looks like he's going to attempt to do a last ride on the announce desk, which Punk counters out of. Spinning heel kick, Taker's laying prone on the announce table, and Punk goes up to the turnbuckle and does the elbow drop onto the outside, which was, you know, nice move. It's it looked like maybe not the most comfortable landing, but I suppose how could it be?
It's a good spot, that.
Yeah, and it's the type, they're done an awful lot now, but I think when they're done right, they still look impressive.
That's the thing. Absolutely agree. I've twice now I've seen Punk do that. I don't know if you've watched one of the other matches where he did that, and I'm like, I don't think he's going to make that. He kind of looks a little unsteady on his feet when he's kind of doing like the bouncing, like a kid in a bouncy castle type thing to get a bit of momentum going, but it looks really cool.
Yeah, and there's again, Undertaker was known, I think, latterly for this submission hold called the Hell's Gate. Not a big fan, I prefer Undertaker not to be. It doesn't seem right to me, Undertaker doing submission moves. I don't know why. But anyway, it's again countered, which gives Punk another chance to use the Anaconda Vice. I mean, it's WrestleMania. Undertaker's not going to be tapping out to a submission hold, but there is a point where Punk hits the GTS on Undertaker, and again, I think it's just showing the amount of offense that the big man and one of the most respected workers of all time in the business is giving CM Punk. Mm-hmm. He dominates this for large portions of time, and the Undertaker has the comeback at the end. But apart from that, it's basically Punk's match. For the finale, I think I remembered this wrong initially. I always remembered that there was someone that tried to do the tombstone on the Undertaker, but I think that was Orton.
It's been done a few times. Roman's had him in this position as well, I think, in their match. Is this when Punk has got him and he kind of does the backward roll type thing?
Yeah, because he's going for, I think, indicating he might go for a tombstone, because he does the Undertaker expression with the tongue out on the
thumb across the neck.
Yeah,
thumb across the throat. It's over.
Yeah, and that normally would lead to the tombstone in Undertaker matches, but yeah, Undertaker goes for a last ride, and Punk gets the urn from Paul Heyman, hits Taker on the back of the head, and then Punk goes for the arms crossed cover.
That's class, One of my favourite bits of this match.
And I get it's so natural because it plays into everything he's done in the build-up and the moveset he's gone through in the match. And it just felt like a big moment. And, Undertaker kicks out of it. And it almost came across as that is the last sign of disrespect. That's it now.
Yeah.
Punk goes for the GTS. Undertaker counters for the tombstone and the win. But if I'm remembering rightly, I've not written it down in my notes, and I don't know why I wouldn't. Did Punk kick out of a tombstone in this match? I think he did.
Pass. I don't have that written down.
I think he kicks out of an initial one earlier on in the match, and it takes a second one.
I think you're right. I think Taker had the. I think this is the. The situation where Taker had the tongue out, the eyes up. Yeah. And it was over and Punk kicked out. I think you're right.
Yeah. Which, for any, I think, performer to kick out of a tombstone, I think you always have to be at a certain level to be getting the chance to do that. So talk about the streak and all that, and it continues, and I think I got to a point where I never expected it to be broken. I was quite surprised they did it in the end. But I think there were some people that looked like they were very competitive and very close to doing it, and he was one of them. And
Big Boss Man at WrestleMania 15 as
well. Fun times.
Sorry.
So yeah, I think of all the match types that you mentioned, he disappointed not to get the main event, but got a match against the Undertaker, and again was made to look very strong in that match.
Definitely.
And I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the disrespect. I wouldn't have done the pallbearer stuff, but aside from that, everything that happened in the match, I thought was great, and I thought it made him look like a heel, but a very accomplished, capable heel.
Yeah. In the last episode, we talked very briefly about the angle with Paul Bearer, and I'd says to you that was really distasteful. And then when you see it through into the match and the kind of story that's being told, it works. This to me felt like Punk was almost in kind of over the top panto heel mode. Him and Heyman doing what they were doing with the urn, and like you've said, it all ties together as far as the disrespect, doing the old school, doing the neck slash, doing the tombstone and the pin. The Undertaker does. Like, it was just so beautifully told. I was really, really impressed with this. I was really impressed with Undertaker. I thought he looked in really good shape. And I was surprised, like how you've described there, I was surprised at what Punk was all doing. Something that really stood out to me about this was the entrances. I loved Punk's entrance with the live version of Cult of Personality. Normally, when Undertaker is on my television screen, I tend to fast forward his entrance because I don't really have the time to sit about and watch an hour-long old man walk into the ring and smoke. But I watched it in full, and it was amazing to me how much that pulled me in to the whole atmosphere of the match. I felt like a kid watching him coming down with his music and the atmosphere. I was really surprised with how much it had an effect on me.
That's awesome. That
is not to say that I will be watching. We better never do a top 5 Undertaker matches because I refuse to watch him coming in that many times. But this must have been a really short programme because we've obviously referenced the programme they had with The Rock up to Elimination Chamber and losing the title, and then they must have had a few weeks to kind of do something to get him this match with Undertaker for WrestleMania. So I think it's obviously, they've obviously done a really good job of building something out of nothing almost. To have this match at WrestleMania. It was a great match. I loved it. One of my favourite matches that I've seen Undertaker in for years and years.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm with you.
Cool.
So we've had The Rock, we've had Daniel Bryan, we've had Brock Lesnar, we've had Chris Jericho, we've had The Undertaker. So our number one, I'm guessing we're on the same page here. Money in the Bank 2011, John Cena.
Yeah, it was a bit risky because we didn't actually confirm this one beforehand. But
no.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you would ever do a top 5 and John Cena would be number 1?
I think he's one of those guys that I've come to appreciate more in the later years, once the frustration of him appearing in every main event for every pay-per-view for what felt like 10 years had passed, because he can actually be a pretty good worker, and there's a lot of good things in this match, but to be honest, so much of it is the crowd and the story. I think we spoke about that before. I think when we were talking about our greatest all-time wrestlers, a lot of the time it's not the person's work, but it's the storyline that they've been given to work with that creates that person. Yeah, now I imagine it's one of the most well-known ones, but just for anyone who's listening that isn't aware of the story at the time, CM Punk had been in contract negotiations, and I think there was an element of truth in this. I think from what I hear at the time, he was very tempted to move on. He was struggling with the schedule. He was feeling he wasn't being utilised the way he should have been. I think he ended up getting a nice tour bus out of the whole thing.
Really?
There was a documentary I saw where he basically, you know how they drive town to town after shows and things like that, and they're always on the road. One of his biggest gripes was, getting in his car and being on the road the whole time, not having time to do anything else. And they gave him as part of his contract this tour bus, so he would have a bit more space. I don't know if they paid for a driver or if he had to sort that out himself, but there's a point in the documentary where it's he and Kofi Kingston, and they're like playing video games on the tour bus.
Oh dear.
And it's
Mark Calloway would not like that.
He would not approve.
Imagine how angry he'd be at that.
It's a good thing he didn't know about that before the Mania. but apparently, you know, he and Kofi were friends, and he would at times, you know, if they're going to the same town, get other people to ride in his bus with him. But he just felt like, I think it had a bed in it and stuff like that. He felt like it took the drag out of the travel a little bit. But yeah, he's obviously signed. You know, he's re-signed before this match is ever taking place. But the storyline they're going with on screen is that he is out of contract when this pay-per-view ends. His contract expires at the end of that night. I mean, it does raise some questions if you dare thinking about it logically, that, well, if you're in that situation, why are you putting the guy in the main event for the title? Doesn't really make sense. But
no, they did it with Jeff Jarrett, Adam. They got to a point where, you know about this?
Yes, I do.
Good. It's the reason Jeff Jarrett got fired the night that Vince revealed that he'd bought WCW. Anyway, sorry.
So the whole thing is, Punk has said that if he, you know, he's going to win the title and then he's walking away as champion, he's taking the belt with him. I think you know, in his famous pipe bomb speech, which anyone who has an interest in watching this match should make a point of listening to, he gives a brilliant promo while there's a prone John Cena in the ring, who's just had a match that Punk's interfered in, where he's basically complaining about everything that he thinks is wrong with the way the company's run. He clearly feels like he should be the top guy and he's not. Apparently, I think this is all, you know, rumour and innuendo, but apparently he was basically told, can I just get a microphone and go out and say what's on my mind? And they gave him some parameters. So, you know, as you would expect, they basically said you have to reference the match because, you know, we're selling pay-per-views here, you know. You have to stay on storyline. But yeah, you know, within boundaries, you can say whatever you want. So away from somebody else writing his words for him, he actually determined what he was going to say. And it comes across, because it comes across as, this is how I genuinely feel. And he has a rant about the fact he's not going to be in the WrestleMania main event, but a part-timer in The Rock is. He has a moan about how he is best in the ring, on commentary, on the microphone. Everything he does is the best, and he's not appreciated for it. And then it's such a hot start, and then such a good match, but they lose traction on it really quickly, to be honest. But what they had was a really good storyline of a very over character, because not only is this match taking place in Chicago, which is Cena's hometown and where he is worshipped, but also it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly that, maybe not to the extreme that he says it, but a lot of the people he's speaking to when he gives this promo actually agree with him. A lot of the fans agree that they're pushing the wrong people, that Vince McMahon is ruining the company. You know, there's a lot of people nodding their heads and cheering along to that. So it all brings us to this match, where I think there's also a caveat that if Cena loses, he's fired, but that's never followed through on, I wouldn't have thought. And Vince McMahon is desperate for Punk not to leave the arena with the title. So there's more back and forth between the two, McMahon and Punk, in the weeks in between, when he's trying to get him to sign a new contract. And I think there's, you know, famous moments where Punk's demanding that they bring back WWE ice cream bars, and that his face should be on them, or something like that.
That's right.
At
one point he has a t-shirt, I can't remember when it is, I've definitely seen him coming out with a t-shirt with the ice cream bar on it, with CM Punk ice cream bars on it. Do you know what? Sorry, do you know what I really like about what they did with Cena's character in this period leading up to this match? Is they don't have him as the kind of stereotypical yes man that you probably would have in this situation. After Punk does his pipe bomb promo, he gets suspended, and you have Cena then asking for him to get brought back because he wants to fight him.
Yeah.
I really like that, and they have Punk as this kind of they have Cena as this kind of almost like kind of lone wolf kind of character that he just wants to fight him, which I really liked because it would have been really easy for them, like for Vince to be on Cena's side, where it's not really seen as that.
Yeah, and I think, in Chicago, as soon as you're starting the match, Cena's going to be seen as the pantomime villain, because it can't really go any other way. When I was rewatching this, one of my favourite things about it is the crowd reactions at the start. When Punk comes out, the cheers and then the chanting that follow. I mean, I remember in the Stone Cold Steve Austin era, peak Austin during the Attitude Era, some of the reactions were amazing when he came out. But I don't know that I'd ever heard anything quite like this. It was so passionate towards supporting their guy. And, he comes out, I think he has an embrace with his mum who's in the crowd.
Yep.
And then into the ring.
Cole Cabana's next door as well, I'm sure.
Oh, is he?
In the front there, right?
He's sat then in the ring, cross-legged, just sitting, taking it all in, while they're just chanting CM Punk. And there's these signs, which I think are the ECW inspired, where there's like if Punk loses, we riot, and things like that.
Yep.
And then you contrast it with the reaction Cena gets, who he's never, well, not for years anyway, been universally loved, but he would always have a lot of cheers when he came out. Many boos, but a lot of cheers. And it's the booing is incredible when he comes out. And he doesn't even...
He no sells them, though, eh?
Yeah.
I really like that, actually.
And he actually looks, and I think they reference it, that he's all business. He isn't doing the posturing and the gesturing. He just wants to get on with the match, get in the ring, have the match. And there is there's actual signs of respect from Punk as well. Like he's not overly sarcastically looking as he applauds Cena when he's, making his way down to the ring and things like that. And the match, once it actually gets going, everything Punk does is cheered, everything Cena does is booed. He takes off his t-shirt and throws it into the crowd, and they throw it back. And it's just so bizarre to see it that position with Cena provoking that level of dislike from the fans. But in the end, not an awful lot to do with him really. It's purely the situation that they're in.
Yep.
So yeah, I've watched this match quite a few times, and it wasn't one I felt the need to watch again, to be honest, when I was doing the research, because I knew I was putting it in. I knew it was going to be number one because of everything around it. But I do remember thinking, there were all these years of the accusations that Cena can't wrestle. That was, it used to be a chant that went round, "You can't wrestle." But he's actually, and I think a lot of it'll be to be who he's in the ring with, but he's at worst competent. He's actually pretty good when he's in the mindset that he needs to be putting someone over.
Yep.
And we saw that a lot more in the later years, when I think the main part of his job was putting people over. But it's a decent match in terms of the quality, but it's so much about the passion and the crowd and the story.
Yeah. I think going back to what you're saying there about Cena, I've seen Cena doing moves that I'd never seen him do before in this match, and also taking risks, like the leg drop from the top rope thing that he does, kind of famouser type thing that he does from the top rope. I feel like these two feel like they really work well together. And a lot of the time that's the thing that can elevate a match. yeah, I'm really surprised again at how much I enjoyed this. But like you say, the number one big thing about this is the atmosphere. It's just incredible. I can't imagine what it might have been like to be there.
Yeah, yeah. They have the moment where Punk's in control, and out comes Vince and John Laurinaitis.
Yes. Yes, please.
Johnny,
yes.
Johnny Ace.
Tell me what you're going to say. Please tell me what you're going to say.
I now feel under pressure.
Sorry.
So I think what they were going for here was something reminiscent of the screw job.
Screw job. Oh,
where
okay.
Vince is coming out to make sure he gets the outcome he wants in this match, and he sends Laurinaitis. So Laurinaitis is clearly going to be the guy who has to in some way stop the match.
Yes.
And then Cena pops out of the ring, knocks him down.
No. No, he does not knock him down. I think he damn near kills him. It's unbelievable. You should not be clotheslining a man like that. He destroys him.
So, yeah, I do remember thinking it was quite a brutal hit on poor Johnny, who's, all he ever does is come up with finishes for people, and he gets that kind of treatment. So, I think Cena then approaches McMahon and says something like, "A man's going to win this fight," or it's something like that, and he's not allowing it to be stopped. It has to be decided in the ring.
Which is in keeping with his character and everything that he's been doing up to this point.
Yes, and because in the next city they go to anyway, there's going to be an element in the crowd that are very pro Cena. So it's the logical thing to do. It's the right thing to do, and it also serves as not an excuse, but the whole thing can be seen as a little bit of a distraction. Mm-hmm. The fact he's had to go out and do that, because I think it's fairly quick after that he gets caught by Punk.
I think he pretty much comes back in and hits the GTS, does he not?
Yeah. And then there's the 3 count, and I loved there's the crowd reaction, which is great. It's like a packed house at a football game celebrating a goal. It's that moment of cheer, but there's also a look on Punk's face of like joy in the fact that he's been able to accomplish what he set out to accomplish. And this is something that I only pick it up from a few people. If you've just won the belt or just achieved something significant, you should be, celebrating. You should be kind of almost overcome with what you've achieved. And so often it's just a raise of the belt and a sort of stern celebratory look. I still remember there was a point when Daniel Bryan won the Money in the Bank, and he's on top of the ladder, and he's like shaking the briefcase as he pumps his fists and celebrating what was at the time his biggest moment. And I just feel like that they're lost with the fact people don't celebrate them enough at times. But Punk, there's this added element of, I am going to be able to screw this company. And it's this like twinkle in his eye. And I just thought it was brilliant. I loved it. And he, he's holding the belt up to the camera, he's smiling, and then Vince tries his sort of last ploy.
Get Del Rio out here.
Yeah, he takes over one of the commentator mics, doesn't he?
Aye.
He takes the headset off them, demands Del Rio out, who just won the Money in the Bank ladder match earlier in the night. Del Rio comes running out, and Punk kicks him in the head before he has the chance to cash in and get his match.
Yep.
And then there's like this laughter as Punk is sitting on the barrier, the fan barrier, holding the belt, and he blows a kiss to McMahon.
Yep.
So it's like he's healing out, but he's in Chicago, and he's the ultimate fan favourite. And yeah, then just seeing him disappear through the crowd, as the commentators are selling the fact that he's no longer an employee of this company come midnight. And yeah, just a really well told story that I just wish they'd capitalised more on long term, but never mind. You know, it still, I think, stands out as one of the great matches because of everything around it.
Yeah. Yeah, similar to a lot of the other matches we've spoken about here. In isolation, it's just a great match with a great story. It's just unfortunate. You know, they talk. I think Punk had talked in that Pipe Bomb promo about going to Ring of Honor or taking the belt to New Japan. And they could have done so much more with that. They could have been really, really innovative and have done something completely different with that. But yeah, unfortunately, didn't. They kind of mishandled it. But
it's funny when you think of the parallels of what's going on just now with what AEW are doing.
Yep.
You know, turning up on Impact and things like that. And I think, you know, as you say, missed opportunity. I'd probably never before heard those other companies referenced on WWE programming, which is, I mean, the fact that they were mentioned was like, you know, a starting point. They just never capitalised on it, never followed through with it. And I think he was only away for a couple of weeks, and then they basically held a tournament to crown another champion because the champion's gone. And then was it Rey Mysterio that they put the belt on? I'm trying to remember. But then, you know, Punk comes back and they have to have the unification, you know, series and all that. But it just felt like it could have gone on so much longer and been so much bigger. But for what it was in that one night, it was great. Yeah,
no, agreed. Do you have any other matches that you want to mention that almost made it onto your top 5?
No, I think the one you mentioned, the Rey Mysterio one, was one I considered. There was another one with Jericho that I watched. I can't now remember when and where it was, and I decided, well, I'm only gonna have one with Jericho, and I'll go for the one that I thought was the better match. But yeah, there were a couple I watched. Beyond that, there's nothing I can really remember looking at that I was thinking about putting in. What about you?
I had a couple that I enjoyed, but just probably weren't up there. I've got that this was John Cena SummerSlam 2011, but I don't know if that can be right.
Okay.
This was the one that Triple H refereed, and at the end, Kevin Nash came out through the crowd and powerbombed Punk.
Yeah.
And then Del Rio did cash in. But that's making me think that is that right? Do you know?
I think it could be, yeah.
This is what I remember. I texted you. This is the whole nonsense with Kevin Nash text himself and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They really, again, poor execution, but it was a good match. That.
Yeah.
And I really, I enjoyed that Jericho match as well. There was a Money in the Bank match in Money in the Bank 2013. It had RVD, Sheamus, Randy Orton, Christian and Daniel Bryan.
Okay.
And Punk in it. And like listening to those guys that's involved, it looked like it was going to be a really good match, but it didn't really live up to that, the kind of expectation of what I had for it. I think RVD's a wee bit older here, and he's maybe coming back for a few kind of one-off matches, which it was quite good, but not as good as some of these that are on the list.
Yeah.
So that was our top 5 CM Punk matches. Are really enjoyable. Like I've said before, like this was at a time. A lot of these matches was at a time where I didn't really watch at all. I remember getting back in, like probably a lot of people did, round about the Pipe Bomb.
Yeah.
I think word of mouth spread about that, and a lot of people got kind of interested, at least. Who's this kind of Stone Cold-esque character that was railing against the authority and all that sort of stuff? So I really enjoyed those matches, and it was a pleasant surprise to me that someone as good as him on the mic was pretty much just as good in the ring
Yeah.
as well.
Did you notice when he did the pipe bomb, he was wearing a Stone Cold t-shirt?
Yep. Like that as well.
Yeah.
I also like the way he said Dwayne. I wish I knew someone called Dwayne so that I could say that, speak to them like that.
Yeah, that was good.
You know, like for years and years now, it's been Punk's going to come back every single Royal Rumble or WrestleMania or whatever. Do you think you'd like to see him back in this current version of what, I don't know, WWE is, AEW? Would you like to see him back?
I think if he could be what he was previously, which is the kind of thing you don't really know until he tries it, and I think if it was the right programme, I would now see him as somebody that I would want to elevate someone else, and it would be more about getting those elements right for me. I'd want there to be a good build with a bit of verbal sparring, which is a little bit tricky because it has to be somebody that can hold their own, because there is the risk he could kind of blow somebody away with that.
Yeah.
But from a purely in-ring entertainment point of view, I would like to say I don't think there's any need for him to come back and be working hundreds of dates in a year or anything like that. I think he could come back, have a really valuable, good program or two, and then disappear a while. Almost like what they were doing with Jericho in his later WWE runs. And I think you put him with the right person and you could have, a match of the year. So yeah, I would like to see it, not knowing what he's, I suppose the last thing he would have trained for was MMA rather than wrestling. So not really knowing what his physical condition's like. I'm sure he keeps himself in good shape, but it's something I would like to see in the right circumstances.
I think that's what that my issue would be. Is I think my answer to that is no. I don't think I would want to see him in this current version of WWE. They seem to get so bored, or they move on from things and storylines so quickly that I don't think it would do him any justice. However, just thinking about what you were saying there about him, putting him in with somebody that could spar with him, I think him and Drew McIntyre would possibly do something quite good together. Yeah,
and that would be an intriguing matchup to me. I think Drew McIntyre's now at that kind of level where he should be able to hold his own with someone of that kind of stature. And I would put it this way: I'd much rather see McIntyre and Punk rather than McIntyre and Goldberg. So, yeah.
I think I would much rather hear like a Punk podcast or a Punk audiobook where there's no restrictions and he could speak freely. I don't think we'll ever see that either. He doesn't seem like the type of guy that seems open to doing something like that. I would much rather hear his views on things. I know he did the Fox show Talking Smack, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
It seemed a bit of a damp squib, to be honest, from little clips and stuff that I've seen online. I think it was built up to be this amazing thing, and he's going to come and do the pipe bomb on SmackDown, and I don't really think it was what it could have been.
I think it was always pretty clear as well that he was employed by Fox and not WWE at that time. So I'm not sure just how much any relations have thawed, to be honest.
I don't think so. It's so funny, isn't it? Vince seems to be able to forgive and forget with most people, but this one seems to have stuck. I get the impression CM Punk's a pretty stubborn guy.
I think that's probably what it is. It's probably two stubborn guys. I don't know if was it in a book or a podcast, but I've got memories of JR saying that he when he was trying to facilitate Austin coming back after he and McMahon had big fallouts, he just knew he needed to get them in the same room. And because they're so stubborn, both of them, that neither were going to make the first move.
Right.
And I do wonder if there's similarities between Vince and Punk, and maybe nobody is there to mediate making the first move.
Nah. Oh, you tell me that Byron Saxton's not going to get them. He's surely got the character to get them in.
He maybe does. Yeah, yeah, maybe.
Tom Phillips. Aye, no, I honestly don't think we'll ever see it. But I just wonder what it might look like if he was to, there was a lot of rumours of AEW having the show in Chicago, and he did the Starcast thing.
Yeah.
That, was that Conrad that was doing that?
Yeah.
I wonder what that would look like. I wonder who he might work with in AEW.
That's probably a more interesting proposition. And also, I don't think he would have the same creative shackles on him there.
Yeah.
I think if he came up with a good idea, there would be plenty of people happy to just run with it and let him run his own creative for it, which might be more appealing to him. And it'd just be, there's the potential for some really interesting matchups if that did happen. But I think I'm like you, I'm just not sure he's got any appetite to get back involved in the ring, to be honest.
Nah, it doesn't seem like it. He seems like he's quite happy he seems to be doing MMA commentary.
Yeah.
And hanging out with his wife and I mean, I'm not going to go there. Okay, that was our top 5 CM Punk matches. Let us know if you agreed, if there were any matches that we missed. You can comment on our Instagram at Middle-Aged Outlaws. Give us a look up. Or you can also email us at middleagedoutlaws@gmail.com, Adam. And let us know what we missed or what you would like us to talk about next. And on that note, what we'd agreed was that because I picked this Punk episode, you were going to pick the next subject. So I am eagerly waiting. Hit me with our next topic.
Okay, so a little bit outside the box with this one.
I like outside the box.
What we're going to look at is we will remember the invasion angle when WWE had basically bought out its competition and WCW aligned with ECW to compete against WWE, and I think it's generally considered to have been one of the biggest failures in wrestling history, given what it could have and should have been.
Yep.
There's obviously a whole lot of reasons played into why things went the way they went, but what we're going to do is basically rebook how that invasion angle could have gone.
Amazing.
So it's a little bit more creative than than watching a series of matches. It'd be more about looking at what was there, what was available, what the possibilities were, how it could have gone, rather than the basic lengthy squash match that it ended up being.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. I think this is for people our age and for people that watched the Attitude Era, and if you were a WCW fan and watched Nitro, this was what you maybe always wanted. This maybe not in the situation that it was in, but an opportunity to see the best of one side go against the best of the other side. You've got one bald guy with a goatee destroying people on one side and the same on the other. And we never got it, did we?
Yeah, and there's reasons, and as we're doing things, we can, reference the reasons why things were maybe done as they were done. We'll talk about it as we go, but a lot of the big hitters on the WCW side were on guaranteed money from Ted Turner, and they could sit at home and get paid. They didn't actually need to go and sign for another organisation. But even with what they had available to them, I think there's a general feeling that things could have been done differently and a lot better. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, well, let's see if we can put our money where our mouth is then. That'll be awesome. I'm looking forward to that already.
Cool. Yeah, we're going to find out how difficult it actually is to book a wrestling show.
Yeah, that's it. Come listen to our cluster of awful booking when we put Sean O'Hare in a main event against Stone Cold. Anyway, looking forward to that. That'll be a bit different. So yeah, should be fun. Episode 7, we'll rebook the invasion angle.
Awesome.
Until then, thanks for listening. This has been episode 6. We've been the Middle-Aged Outlaws. Stay safe, and until next time, take it easy. Cheers, Adam.
Cheers.